Well, again, welcome. It's great to be able to get together, to be able to worship. It's even more wonderful to be able to have some actual real human beings here instead of just empty pews. It's a good time, and this crack in the door, that begins to give us some light for the future. So hang in there. If you were with us last week, you saw in the gospel lesson, you saw this tremendous confidence that comes from Peter. You'll remember the story in the Gospels from last week when Jesus has to get away with his disciples. He's going to Jerusalem, and he needs to be able to spend some time with them to just kind of get away. And so he needs to get away from the crowds and from all of the people that are constantly looking for ministry from Jesus. And so he goes way up to Caesarea Philippi, as far north as we know that Jesus ever went. And he huddles there with his disciples, and he asks them, so who do people say that I am? And they speculate about Elijah or Jeremiah or one of the great prophets, and we talked about that last week. And then he said, well, what about you? Who do you say that I am? And it was Peter. And after maybe some silence, some awkward silence, it's Peter who was willing to say, well, you're the Messiah, the Christ, the anointed one, the Son of the living God. The implication being, you're the one that we've been waiting for. We've been hoping that God would send his anointed one that would lead us. And so we're here with you. We're here for you. And you're the guy. You're my guy. You're the guy who it is that we're going to follow. And so Jesus says, no human being revealed this to you. It was the Spirit of God that was working in you that revealed that to you. And so this tremendous confidence that Peter had, and Jesus just affirms him, saying, you got it right, Peter. That's exactly who I am. I'm the anointed one. And so then this gospel lesson for today, kind of takes the next step of that conversation. And so Jesus then goes on and he says, so this is what's going to happen. So we're on our way to Jerusalem, and what's going to happen in Jerusalem is that the religious leaders I'm going to be betrayed. The religious leaders are going to arrest me, and I'll be beaten, and I'll be killed. And Peter says, No, you've got the wrong playbook. That's not how this works. You are the anointed one of God. That means you're the one that we've been waiting for. That means you are the one who is supposed to bring into existence the kingdom of God here. That means that the rise of the Jewish state here. That means getting rid of these pagan Gentiles and allowing us to rule over the world. That's what the Messiah means. None of this, betrayal and getting killed stuff. You can't do that to the Messiah. And Jesus hears the words of Peter. And underneath the words of Peter, he hears the words of the tempter. The tempter who would sidetrack him from the road to the cross. Who would take him in a way that was the way of power and dominion, but not the way of obedience. And so he says to Peter, get behind me, Satan. Gosh, could you imagine Jesus saying those words to you? Get behind me, Satan, to your face. This voice that's coming out of your mouth is the voice of the tempter who would take away from me the need to pick up my cross. And Peter, by the way, anyone who wants to follow me needs to pick up their cross and follow me as well. There's a cross there that has your name on it. And if you want anything to do with me, you've got to pick that up and follow me. Well, what a sobering reality that was, and why it's so important for Jesus to have gotten away. No more distractions, to be able to just hear the word of Jesus. It's why it's so important for us to be able to spend time in solitude and prayer and to reading Scripture, to allow Jesus to speak to us in order that we can hear what sometimes are difficult words from him, so that we can hear good words from him. So this need that Peter has to allow these old ideas about who Jesus was supposed to be, to allow those ideas to die, to allow his dreams of what it meant for him to be at Jesus' right side when he took the throne, and all of the ambition and excitement and power that would mean, to allow that to die. These important things that he saw about himself, to allow those things to die so that he could be changed and serve in a completely different and far deeper way. You know, it is just the truth about what it means to follow Jesus. What it means to hear the voice of God is that our ways are not his ways. And it's often painful for us to come to the place of allowing those old preconceptions to be able to go by the side and to enter into the scary new territory of where it is that God would take us. We've been reading in Exodus. And so we run into Moses, who was this Jewish boy who was raised in Pharaoh's household, who knew at some point, realized that he had Jewish blood in him, and so frustrated he must have been with this slavery of his family under the hands of the Pharaoh and the Egyptians, and so he gets this freedom fighter fire burning in him. And so one day he sees, an Egyptian fighting with a Jew, and he comes to the aid of the Jew, and he murders the Egyptian and buries him in the sand. And he's thinking, probably this is the beginning of the revolution. Let's overthrow these suckers. But then on another day, he's talking with somebody, and there gets to be a little conflict, and he expresses his opinion, and this other Jew says, "Well, you know what you gonna do? You're gonna kill me like you killed the Egyptian, bury me in the sand? Is that what you're gonna do?" And now all of a sudden, he's no freedom fighter. He's a criminal, and he's terrified, and so he runs. He runs out into the wilderness, to the land of Midian. They ain't nothing in the land of Midian but a bunch of sheep. And that's where he goes. And for 40 years, he spends time learning what it means to be a shepherd, and learning what it means to have surrendered all of his ideas about who he was. And it's finally, after he's completely broken, completely burned, completely surrendered, now he's ready to hear the voice of God out of the burning bush. 80 years old, when lots of people are thinking about their retiring. Oh no, for Moses, he's just starting to be able to impact the world. Think about that when you think about your retirement plans. God's got plans for us if we pick up our cross and follow him. It is a part of what it means for us to follow Jesus, allowing these old things to be able to die so that we can be raised up. We know that it's important for us as we raise our children, as we think about who we are and what it is that we do, how critical it is for our expectations, our roles, our old identities to die in order for people to be able to grow. Jane Goodall was, you may remember, she was a naturalist. She worked with chimpanzees in the jungles, and one particular story I can remember about her was she was profiling this one particular older chimpanzee, a woman, a female who had given birth later in life to a child of hers. And it was a boy, and he was growing up, and he was rambunctious. We might say he was ADD. He was always kind of, creating problems and doing things, and she was always very kind of indulgent. And then finally, he got to the age and to the place where mother chimpanzees, kick him out. Kind of kick him out, get him out, and so that he's independent. So he's living out his own life, becoming his own person. And yet she was old, and she didn't have the energy, and so she couldn't kick him out. And so he clung to her, and she would continue to pamper him and to provide for him, and he would continue to just be a bratty kid. So Jane Goodall went away, and then she came back and was taking the attendance of all of the chimps she'd been following, and she didn't see them. And so she looked around, and she went down by the river, and down laying there by the side of the river was the body of this mother chimpanzee. She was old, and she'd given in to illness, but it was not far from where she lay that Jane also found the body of her son, who didn't know how to survive on his own, who had never learned what it meant to be an adult. To allow things to die, to allow our past to be our past, to set aside old ways of doing things is critical for us to step into the new things that God has for us, to be able to grow and to develop and to allow the people who are around us and all of our relationships and all of our ideas and self-conceptions and preconceptions, to allow the old things to be shed so that we can move on to who it is that God is calling us to be. And it is a big place. And yet our eye, like Peter, gets focused on the pain of the cross. But the pain of the cross is just the pathway to what we know will be the empty tomb. Peter doesn't hear what Jesus says when he's talking to him. In the passage it says when Jesus is explaining what's going to happen, he says he's going to have to suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and that on the third day be raised to new life. Peter didn't hear that last piece. And on the third day be raised to life. He doesn't hear that at all. He just hears that there's going to be a cross and that he's going to be betrayed and he's going to be killed and laid in the ground. He doesn't hear that he will be raised on the third day. He doesn't hear the part that is the core of our faith, the good news that's buried in the mountain of death, that allows us to be able to shine as people with hope and a future. He doesn't realize that it's the path of the cross that leads to the tomb that is then empty and allows for a future and a hope and things that are much bigger than anything we possibly could have imagined. The cross is tremendous good news for us because it allows us the freedom of these things that would hang on to us and cling to us and keep us from being the people that God has created us to be. All of our fears, our anxieties, our worries, our reflections of what it is that God is doing to move us beyond our current preoccupations into something that's much bigger. And all of the fears, behind all of the fears, is the fear of our mortality, the fear of death. I mean, we see it with the coronavirus around us and all of the things that we have to do in order to keep death from knocking on our door. And yet death, this entry point for us, this entry point into a new way of living, a new way of being. I have a spiritual director. He's a retired pastor, and he's seen more than I will ever see. He's in his 80s, and he works with veterans, he's worked with hospice, and so he and I were talking, and we talked about what it was like for him to get old. And I asked the question. I said, "So what about death? How do you think about death?" To have that kind of a conversation with somebody who's in their later 80s, it's the opportunity for tremendous transparency, tremendous honesty, if we take it. And so he just kind of took a little sigh and sat back, and he said, "I think of death as a kind of birth." And so it's like a baby that is in the womb, and the baby only knows the womb, the warmth, the security of it, the darkness of it, the fluid all around it. The universe for that infant is the womb, and then suddenly, over a period of time, there are these restrictions, these contractions that happen, and it becomes upsetting for the baby. The heart rhythm increases, and it's clear that the child is in turmoil, as all of a sudden his world is changing and collapsing on him, and all of a sudden the threat that something's going wrong, and so it just continues. The pressure continues. It gets worse, and it gets worse, and it gets worse, until finally there's this tremendous push, not to his death, but through the birth canal. And all of a sudden on the other side of the birth canal are loving hands that pick him or her up, that clean him off, that clip the old umbilical cord, and there's lights, and there's smells and sounds, and there's a world that you had no idea even existed. But that's far bigger, far more different than anything you could ever have imagined before, because it was out of any scale of comparison to anything that you'd experienced. That's what I think about death. Well, that comes from a different place. That comes from a different place of confidence that the one who made us is a God of love, and that he invites us to be able to step into, to prepare for what is this tremendous adventure that he has designed for us. And yet, in order for us to be prepared, in order for us to kind of get on our eternal skin, we have this invitation of picking up our cross, of denying ourselves, of seeing parts of us die that we would rather cling to, that we hold frantically to be able to see them die and go away, so that we can be free and enter into a wide and spacious land, surrounded by hands that love us and embrace us and prepare us for a world that's far greater than anything we could have ever imagined, because we have nothing that could even compare to it. So, this challenge of Jesus: if you seek to be my disciples, if you want to be my disciple, if you want to follow me, you got to pick up your cross and get in line behind me. And so this opportunity for us, like he did with the disciples, to get alone with him, to spend time with him, to be asking the question, so Lord, what is it in me that needs to die? that you're seeking to set me free so that I can be the person that you have created